Emotions, the driving force of human interaction with the world around them. But what happens when these emotions are limited and in some case non-existent? In Mark Haddon's book, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, we follow the story of Christopher, an adolescent with Asperger's. Asperger's is a developmental disorder affecting one's ability to effectively socialize and communicate. Christopher has a limited range of emotional understanding, causing him to sometimes lash out.
The passage we will be sharing is one of the letters Christopher found when he was detecting. It is the turning point in the novel. The letters were from his supposedly deceased mother, and they were addressed to him after her death. The piece will explain the reason she left and where she is now. The passage opens Christopher's eyes, or really mine, because Christopher has Asperger's and does not process things the same way, to the reality of his broken family that he does not realize is broken, due to the affair and deep anger control issues within his mother. He loses all trust for his father and believes his mother was the one who wronged. This is the mother's side of the affair.
Dear Christopher, I said that I wanted to explain to you why I went away when I had the time to do it properly. Now I have lots of time, so I'm sitting on the sofa here with this letter and the radio on, and I'm going to try and explain. I was not a very good mother. Maybe if things had been different, maybe if you had been different, I might have been better at it, but that's just the way things turned out. I'm not like your father. Your father is a much more patient person. He just gets on with things, and if things upset him, he doesn't let it show. But that's not the way I am, and there's nothing I can do to change that. Do you remember once when we were shopping in a town together, and when we went to Mental's, and it was really crowded, and we had to get a Christmas present for Grandma? And you were frightened because all the people in the shop? It was the middle of Christmas shopping when everyone was in town, and I was talking to Mr. Land, who works on the kitchen floor and went to school with me. And you crouched down on the floor and put your hands over your ears, and you were in the way of everyone. So I got cross because I don't like shopping at Christmas either, and I told you to behave, and I tried to pick you up and move you. But you shouted and you knocked those mirrors off the shelf, and there was a big crash, and everyone turned around to see what was going on, and Mr. Land was really nice about it. But there were boxes and bits of broken bowl on the floor, and everyone was staring, and I saw that you had wet yourself. And I was so cross, and I wanted to take you out of the shop, but you wouldn't let me touch you, and you just lay on the floor and screamed, and banged your hands and feet on the floor, and the manager came and asked what the problem was, and I was at the end of my tether, and I had to pay attention for 2 broken mixers. And then I had to walk you all the way home, which took hours because I knew you wouldn't go on the bus again. And I remember that night, I just cried and cried and cried, and your father was really nice about it at first, and he made you supper, and he put you to bed, and he said these things happen, and everything would be okay. But I said I couldn't take it anymore, and eventually got really cross, and he told me I was being stupid, and said I should pull myself together, and I hit him, which was wrong, but I was so upset. We had a lot of arguments like that, because I often thought I couldn't take it anymore. And your father is really patient, and I'm not. I get cross, even though I don't mean to. And by the end, we stopped talking to each other very much because we knew it would always end up in an argument, and it would go nowhere, and I felt really lonely. And that was when I started spending lots of time with Roger. I mean, obviously, we had always spent lots of time with Roger and Eileen, but I started seeing Roger on his own because I could talk to him. He was the only person I could really talk to, and when I was with him, I wasn't lonely anymore. And I know you might not understand any of this, but I wanted to try to explain, so that you knew. And even if you don't understand now, you can keep this letter and read it later, and maybe you might understand then. And Roger told me that he and Eileen weren't in love with one another anymore, and that they hadn't been in love with one another for a long time, which meant that he was feeling lonely too. So we had a lot in common. And then we realized that we were in love with each other. And he suggested that I should leave your father and that we should move into a house together. So I said that I couldn't leave you. And he was sad about that because he understood that you were really important to me. And then you and me had that argument. Do you remember? It was about your supper one evening. I'd cooked you something and you wouldn't eat it, and you hadn't eaten for days and days, and you were looking so thin. And you started to shout, and I got cross, and I threw the food across the room, which I know I shouldn't have done. And you grabbed the chopping board and you threw that and it hit my foot and broke my toes. Then, of course, we had to go to the hospital and I had the plaster put on my foot. And afterward at home, your father and I had a huge argument. He blamed me for getting cross with you, and he said I should just give you what you wanted, even if it was just a plate of lettuce or a strawberry milkshake. And I said I was just trying to get you to eat something healthy, and he said you couldn't help it. And I said, well, I couldn't help it either, and I just lost my rag. And he said that if he could keep his temper, then I should bloody well keep my temper. And it went on and on like this. And I couldn't walk properly for months. Do you remember? And your father had to look after you, and I remember looking at the two of you and seeing you together and thinking how you were really different with him, much calmer. And you didn't shout at one another, and it made me feel sad, because it was like you didn't really need me at all. And somehow that was even worse than you and me arguing all the time, because it was like I was invisible. And I think that was when I realized you and your father were probably better off if I wasn't living in the house anymore. Then he would only have one person to look after instead of two. Then Roger said that he had asked the bank for a transfer. That means he asked if he could have a new job in London, and he was leaving. He asked if I wanted to come with him. I thought about it for a very long time, Christopher. Honestly, I did. And it broke my heart. But eventually, I decided it would be better for all of us if I went. So I said yes. Hugs and kisses. Love, Mom.
Do you think Mom's choice to give up and leave was justifiable?